Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where each week we discuss key issues and news at the intersection of business, technology, and humanities in hopes of making you a better digital leader. We're live each Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. This week, we're discussing generative AI's effect on marketing and social media with industry influencer Evan Kirstel, plus headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up Institute for RPA and AI, as well as the Digital Enterprise Institute. We're a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network, providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. Check us out at irpaai.com or deinetwork.com for more information. My co-host, as always, is Carlos Alvarenga. He's a researcher, an author, an educator at the University of Maryland in Georgetown, and former advisor from EY and Accenture. Carlos, good afternoon, buddy.
Good afternoon, Dan. Good to be back on the show.
Middle of summer. What's happening?
Big news today for me was, actually for lots of people, was yesterday's downgrade of the U.S. sovereign debt by Fitch. So that's been, the markets did not like that. So we're seeing a bit of a sell-off this morning, right? As we talked about a week ago that I thought the market was a little bit frothy. So we're now, SPY's right around 450. So I think it's down about half a percent today. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, right? Back in the days, the economics theory was any country that had 80 to 100% of debt relative to GDP was in big trouble. We're at 120%. So this market sort of decided, well, that's old school thinking. It doesn't really apply to us, but we'll see how this one goes. It happened 10 years ago, and S&P did it, and it was kind of a non-event in the long run. Maybe this is the same thing, but then again, times are different these days. And I thought the most interesting, they gave 3 reasons for the downgrade. The last one I thought was most interesting, which was deteriorating governance. They're like a company that can't decide, man, it's like self-inflicted wounds, right? Own goal, as they say in football. So yeah, I think that's an interesting story to watch.
Listen, no sweat, man. You sold everything you owned anyway. You told
I
me in
did
the
sell
market.
everything a week ago, so I'm fine watching the ticker go down. It's okay.
The one thing I read, and you know more about this than me, but it seemed, at least quickly browsing on LinkedIn and a couple other social media, people seemed surprised, not necessarily about the fact that they did it, but the timing of it.
Right. Not everybody liked the timing. Was another issue here. Why now, right? Also, none of the things that they noted are really news. It wasn't like yesterday, because of, let's say, the Trump indictment. Suddenly, that was such a big thing that they had to go out and sort of make this move. So maybe it was in the works. Maybe they had it. Maybe it was because of the Trump indictment. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to send a message to the policy people in DC saying, stop with these budget games and debt ceiling games because this could get worse. It's more of a technical move at this point, right? Because there are some people who are going to have to sell certain treasuries, right? Because they simply cannot allow. They're not just there's a percentage they have to hold as AAA, and we're no longer AAA. And so right now it's a specialist impact, but again, right? Like somebody goes, it's not an issue until it is, right? And so we'll see.
Well, meanwhile, things seem. I mean, at least if you believe the headlines, people seem to be spending money. There was this article I read this morning about the female dollar, and all the spending that. They're basically, they're calling them the Swifties, right? The Taylor Swift fans and younger generation women who are apparently the average Taylor Swift fan is spending $1,300 to attend her concerts, and things like this. And Barbenheimer, I think, is the new favorite industry term now, where these new movies, Oppenheimer and the Barbie movie, people just spending money and don't seem to be caring what the people in Washington are doing, I guess.
I'm pretty staggered by these concert economics. And there was another article that talked about the rise in VIP passes, where younger people don't want to stand, right? Some of these open kind of standing spaces, right? The VIP, which can run $500 or $1,000, right, and a pass, they're just no more. So I'm staggered by the fact that somebody would like an artist enough to pay 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. Right? And I don't mean if you're a VIP. I'm just saying a regular, quote unquote, regular consumer that would spend that much money uh, for a 2-hour show. But I guess
Yeah, and talk about a bounce back. I mean, AMC theaters claims to have had the best week ever last week. I mean, that's
right.
crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
and the second biggest owner, the owner of Regal Cinemas, Cineworld, is claiming that they've kind of bounced back from the Chapter 11 bankruptcy that they filed for, I guess, earlier this year.
Which, in contrast, only highlights Disney's issues, right? Because I think the next last Disney, which is a Haunted House, is another flop. So they're like on a run of 4 flops. And there was another interesting article in the journal about Bob Iger sort of reconvening some of the old hands, quote unquote, right? Try to figure out what do we do at Disney. So that stock continues to underperform, and especially when you think, okay, here's a couple of movies that were made that are not Disney movies that are doing really, really well. I'm not sure how the industry is doing over the year, right? This seems to be a little bit of an anomaly. These 2 movies are, for some reason, like hit the zeitgeist kind of at the right moment, but I'm not sure whether the industry as a whole is having a great year. I still think it's probably still struggling.
So what'd you think of Oppenheimer?
I thought
no spoiler alerts if you haven't watched it, but what'd you think?
I didn't like a few things about it. I didn't like the ending. I thought it was a little bit overdone at times, too long, right? Half an hour could have been cut without any problems. But I thought the Trinity scene, as I'll call it, was spectacular. That was, to me, the highlight of the movie. And it's a story that I didn't know very well, Confession. So we all know the name. Maybe one of the most important people who ever lived, at least in the 20th century. But I didn't have the details. I didn't know about the Strauss Commission. And so I found the story, although it's long, I was never bored, right? I never waned in the movie. I was watching it the whole time. And I think, by the way, the makeup folks are almost a shoe-in for the Oscar. I didn't know that was Robert Downey Jr. for about 10 minutes.
Wow,
So,
right.
anyway, but as usual, Chris Nolan is a fantastic, just skill, the technical skill of a great director at work is certainly there.
Well, you're 100% spot on. I wouldn't consider myself a historian or an expert in history, but I'm kind of interested in history, very interested in history. And of course, I knew about Trinity and Manhattan Project, but I don't know that I knew even name Oppenheimer until the movie started coming out. And there's this interesting scene in the movie where, and I don't think this gives anything away, where he's meeting with Truman and contemplating this guilt that he feels, and Truman's like, no one's gonna know you. I'm the guy who dropped the bomb. Everyone's gonna. So I'm like, that's kind of what's happened, right? So I thought that was interesting, and you pointed out last week, and I want to ask our guest about this in a minute, but you drew the parallel last week between that and what we're doing with AI right now.
Yeah, right. You wonder in 50 years, are they going to make a movie about, right, somebody saying, hey, well, I'm really upset that I made this AI thing, too bad. And they're going to spend the rest of their life apologizing for ChatGPT or something. But you're right. Not that it's an oblique parallel, but it's still kind of an interesting thought, right, as you look at the AI conversation these days.
Anything else you want to touch on before we invite our guest to join us?
Our guest on. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, as we've been talking a lot about, generative AI and things, we wanted to bring in an expert in the space, but he's really an expert in a bunch of the spaces we talk about. So our guest today is Evan Kirstel. He's a B2B thought leader, top technology influencer, and analyst. He covers 5G, cloud, AI, cyber, and a slew of other topics. Evan, welcome to the show.
Good to see you. So I'm looking for some stock tips at the end of the show, Carlos. So I'll get those from you, I hope.
Just sell. That's
Sell. Okay, good.
Go. We're done.
Deal.
Carlos doesn't know this, but he's actually my stock advisor. I just haven't told him yet.
Welcome, Evan. Nice to have you on the show.
Nice to be here.
So, Evan, before we jump into the topic of the day, and I'm curious, we were just talking about the Oppenheimer movie. I don't know if you saw it, but there's a lot going on in the market right now. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in Washington. A lot of concerns over regulation and compliance and things like that. And then there was this other announcement that that a bunch of these tech companies are putting together an education campaign, $25 million education campaign to start lobbying some of the positive benefits of all this stuff. I'm just curious as to your kind of take as to where we are.
Well, the Kraken has been released, so we're going to see the results of that for good, bad, indifferent. And I'm taking a micro view. Like I've been an early adopter of Gen AI. By early, I mean like last December. That's how quickly things are moving. So I try to ignore the macro and look at the micro. I mean, how can this, as a content creator, as a industry observer, as a tech influencer, how can this help me, help my clients move the needle and make a difference? And I found it extraordinary. So rather than reading headlines and running around with hair on fire, more folks should get their hands dirty, get practical, get really intimate with these technologies, and figure out how to navigate this landscape personally for them, their families, their organizations, their communities, and what have you, versus just reading the Wall Street Journal, which I love to do as well.
That's a good point, actually. Maybe all these politicians on Capitol Hill should have to do something with AI before they start talking about it. Because as Carlos and I have talked about, if you watch some of these congressional hearings, whether it's this or the Ticketmaster one, or even back to the Zuckerberg one years ago, it's just painful to watch these old politicians talk about technology. But
right, and so many people have really grabbed the bull by the horns, no pun intended, and are doing some amazing things. And there are roadblocks and there are landmines to avoid. But there's also a tremendous opportunity, a tremendous upside. And that's what I've been focused on. I'm leveraging almost a dozen different tools at the moment. And I feel like I've gone from a team of, one or two to 10 in a matter of months. So it's been extraordinary for me personally.
So do you think it is sensationalized, some of the
Well, the
stuff in
media
the news?
sensationalizes everything. And of course, we have a long history of Hollywood movies and AI and the Terminator. And there are, concerns around privacy and data protection and security. And, bad actors are going to use these tools like they use everything else for ill. But those risks aside, there's just a tremendous upside. So I'd love to, talk about how I've been using some of the tools, how I see the opportunity from where I stand, and just maybe we can talk advice to some of your members and the viewers here on ways they could leverage Gen AI, Open AI, ChatGPT, and beyond in their business.
So, Evan, I'm curious, when you look at these tools, right, do you see what's the commonality you see? Taking a step back and say, okay, what is it that AI brings to the table in your view that is genuinely new?
I think it's the ability to deliver creativity on demand and at scale. I mean, we've all written a thousand-word blog or created a PowerPoint slide or an image of some kind, and it's long, slow, kind of back-breaking work to kind of do that. And now we've kind of have the ability to 10x our output. I think 10x our quality for some of us who aren't great writers to be more creative and not just in ideation, but actually output, whether it's the written word, audio, podcasting, video, content creation, and to do things and to try do things in a way that, we couldn't do before or felt limited in what we could do before. So this kind of, for me, has just opened so many doors. I just love to share a bit of my enthusiasm.
But do you think there's a paradox in that, right? That if everybody's creative, nobody is. Back to the famous line from The Incredibles, right? If everyone's special, nobody is. Creativity was valued because it was unusual. At the moment, anyone can write a great article, or anyone can create a great piece of art. Then what's so special about making a great piece of
But
art?
can they really? I mean, if you look at some of the masterpieces in the Modern Art Museum,
No,
you'll
my
see,
point is that if you say that this is going to democratize creativity, right, then if it becomes nothing special to create a great piece of art or a great essay or a great piece of music, then it's you're sort of back to everything as a parody, right? We admire a great ad or a great tagline because it's unusual to get something great. Most stuff is pretty mediocre, if not crap. So if making a great
Yeah,
tag,
most handmade art is pretty mediocre and crap. But I think what's going to happen is that the 1 or 2% who really grab hold of these tools and learn them and leverage them, and they're going to be almost inspired or be given new superpowers to create even more interesting and dynamic content.
then
And I
aren't we back to where we started then? That 1% can make great things, and the 99%.
but
It just
but this it's there's a lot of tradecraft and tricks and tips and best practices and prompt engineering and understanding of the tools that, just like when Adobe came out, it didn't all turn us into great illustrators. It gave the people who understood design, aesthetics, and creativity even more power to generate in the digital world. And I think generative AI is pretty similar. You're going to still see a lot of crappy Gen AI produced content, but you're going to see some extraordinary content and some ideas that couldn't be realized before by people who maybe come from new places in the world and aren't necessarily schooled in the traditional crafts or arts. But even things as mundane as writing blogs and creating copy. I mean, we're seeing a wave of, I'd say, personalization 2.0. So Gen AI has become the backbone of marketing personalization. We've all gotten those generic emails or ads. Even the one thing they change is your name on the email, Dear Joe. They have it. Whereas I think AI will generate personal content, recommendations, responses that take into account your personal preferences, your behaviors, even your emotions. So you're going to have this notion of a personal marketer for every customer almost. So that's an opportunity that is really pretty radically new and also dynamic. I mean, the idea of creating a really masterful piece of content, is hard, and you could do it much faster, much easier with Gen AI. You know, develop campaigns that would have take months, and they could take weeks or days. So that it's not eliminating the need for human creativity, but it enhances it, giving you more ideas, more solutions, get rid of a lot of the redundant tasks, and get more content out at scale. So I think that's really been for me the eye opener, and also working in real time. I mean, you see many brands, it takes so long to get ideas and content through the process. AI allows you to kind of respond to marketing needs and sentiment and analyze things in real time in ways that can, be adaptable and, make marketing more responsive than ever. You mentioned Barbie and Oppenheimer and the amount of kind of funny memes and videos and pictures that came out of Barbenheimer just by, kids primarily on social media. It was just so interesting and fun, and even brands started to take advantage of Barbenheimer and the that meme, that trending hashtag within hours. And
Yeah.
so the feedback loop has been closed there.
You hit on something, Evan, which, is one of the many, key benefits that I see, which is, kind of mass personalization, right? There's,
Mm.
there's a, like a lot of technology. I feel like we've hit this point up until the generative AI thing where, technology got goodish to the point where, people can send a lot of emails quickly, a lot of LinkedIn messages quickly. It's very easy to find your target audience on LinkedIn or social media and just spam the heck out of them to the point where I can't even get through my LinkedIn box anymore. Right.
Mm.
But now, that correction's happening, and I think the difference between, automation, which we cover a lot, obviously here, and AI is that, right? Where now, as the end user or as the potential customer, you can kind of sift through all of that noise that's coming at you, because the person on the other end has been able to personalize it for you, and ideally match your needs and challenges up with their solution, so you don't miss it in a inbox full of spam, right?
Yeah, and it's really revolutionized A/B testing as well. So, when I'm creating 10 different versions of a tweet, uh, I can look at 100 versions and pick out the best one that I think has the most impact. Or, if I have a particular, slide or logo, I can say, okay, give me 20 different variants with different themes, and I can use my human decision making to pick what I think is the most impactful one. So it's really increased the ability to iterate, to continuously build on and improve efforts, and take the idea of A/B testing to the next level.
Yeah, and the difference too, I think, is automation and robotic process automation, software automation, kind of got a lot of criticism early on, because people were complaining about things breaking and customers not being happy with the results and the scale or whatever. But it turns out that if you have a bad process and you accelerate it, you automate it, and accelerated the volume and the speed of it, you've just accelerated and increased a bad process. Where I think what you're talking about here is that now there's some intelligence attached to it, where AI can go in there and say, wait a second, this is not maybe the optimal way to do something, right?
Yeah, there is automation is relevant here when it comes to content creation and strategy. I mean, it's expensive doing marketing and enlisting, designers. That's out of the reach of many solopreneurs or small businesses, startups that don't have the budgets of larger organizations. And here, Gen AI can really reduce that cost of marketing and creating marketing content, again, with human oversight, of course. And that's a big deal in, a tough economy with reduced budgets and reduced hiring. Uh, so, there's a strong ROI message as well. And that's not just for social media. I mean, that's advertising. It's expensive to do ads. So how can you generate, hyper targeted advertising that will actually work based on your target customer and demographic or segment, that's, less generic, less like a billboard, and more targeted at a particular customer experience that you're trying to sell to. So many opportunities across the board.
But is there work out there already that you can point to that say this is an example of what I'm talking about, or is it a little bit too early for that?
No, I mean there are some great examples. If you just go to my LinkedIn page, you'll see many examples of campaigns that I'm involved with where I could rapidly incorporate new imagery and data visualizations and graphics that would have required many hundreds, thousands of dollars to create, but I could sort of DIY myself, even though I'm not a graphic designer and don't have access to one. So I think it's a great example was over the winter I was playing with ChatGPT before the big explosion of interest, and I sent personalized Christmas cards to all my clients, and each had a unique picture of incorporated their brand and messaging, and some really interesting poem that incorporated what they were doing, and it was really kind of delightful. And I could have done that. It would have taken months of work to come up with that little campaign. And I think that's just a taste of what small businesses can do, and big businesses are doing, creating much more sophisticated campaigns, giving their designers access to the tools that will enable them to increase their output as well.
I wonder too, Evan, when we get to the point where, for better or for worse, this creates just a new benchmark for all of this stuff, right? To the point where, if you don't have a personalized Christmas card going to your customer, you'll be the outlier, because that will become the norm. And like a lot of technology trends, if you're not doing it, you will fall behind. And to your point, Carlos, right? It becomes the negative differentiator almost, that you are not doing these things, or you're not keeping the pace of others, as far as content creation and certain levels of quality and things. It'll become very obvious maybe at some point, when you're still, if you're still doing this yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting because I see a tension there, right? On the one hand, there is this value, and it's something that's been promised for a while, right? I mean, even marketing email prompts were supposed to give us this personalized message. It doesn't really work that way, right? It's you fill in a field, first name, last name, and then the thing sends out 100,000 emails. There's the tension between a personalized message and a communal experience, right? Imagine if Oppenheimer was different for everybody who saw it.
Yeah, there's a lot of experimentation that's going to be done. Some of it will fail miserably. Some will cross over, ethical guidelines, and brands will get burned.
But I think this
Um,
has been talked about in entertainment for a long time. This idea of like divergent story paths, it hasn't really worked or taken off because people like having seen the same movie. It's good that you and I saw the same version of Oppenheimer, right? If the one in which you saw the bomb didn't go off, it's a different experience, right? What I did.
The Titanic didn't sink, Carlos.
Oh no, really? They sank in your version? Yeah, it's terrible, right? So mine, they hit it and bounced off. So this question of their one reason why sports continues to be such a valued right industry, and it's only going by it's because it's one of the few things that is still left on entertainment that's communal, right? And it's the same. We watch the same World Cup, we watch the same Super Bowl. If we each got our own version of that, nobody would want it. There's a reason why they're talking about paying the French soccer players 700 million euros for one season, Dan, right? If whether it's Mbappe, right? If he takes this deal from the Saudis, we're talking about almost $1 billion to play one season of football in Saudi Arabia. Why is that? Because he's the only one, and the world, everybody gets football, non-American football, right? So I just
and so he, as an influencer, the next level will be create a digital avatar of him with AI, essentially a deep fake video and emulated voice, so he can talk to 20 million fans at once and interact and answer questions via chatbot.
But I think
So
that's the interesting tension, because do you want that if you know that's what it is? Or would you rather get a message which actually is right, the individual saying something, even if it isn't?
yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, one of the fastest growing influencers in Asia and in South Korea and other places are virtual influencers. They are not real human beings. They are
Yeah.
artifacts of AI, and they're out there doing what influencers do, selling and marketing and interacting with fans, and they are not human beings. So we'll see if that's something that lasts. But it's certainly, these virtual influencers are generating, millions and millions of sales. So
Oh, I
it's a
think
great
it's
question.
fascinating. We go back. It was a movie that I mentioned on the show last week. It's Simone, right? Sim One, the not so good Al Pacino movie of a long time ago, in which a kind of frustrated producer invents his own actress, right, and doesn't want anybody to know that this actress isn't real. Right? Not such a good movie, but a kind of prescient movie, right? To predict what the future is going to be like. I don't think we're that far away before our first Avatar wins an Oscar. So you're right. I think it's one of the great questions of will artificial entertainers, artificial personalities reach the same level of influence and popularity? It sounds like you're saying, Evan, it's already happening. It's already on the way in certain parts of the world. When is our artificial Tom Cruise, right, going to arrive, or whoever is the next person? So I think that's really one of the interesting parts of this. The question is, will we have the same affinity, right, Dan, the same relationship with these quote unquote simulated celebrities or simulated influencers that we're going to have with people who are real today?
Well,
I
and do
don't know
those
that question.
and do those interactions then have the same value, right? I remember at some point, my friend as like a young kid or a young adult, one of my friends coming over with like an autograph, from some athlete or whatever, and I'm like, okay, and he was like upset that I wasn't like more impressed by it. I'm like the chances of that thing being authentic and real is probably 20%, right? So, now you do that at scale. Like, you see what's happening with Hollywood and these AI likenesses and things like that. You take something like a Cameo where the celebrity sends you a clip, and if that wasn't actually them, does it have any value?
Yeah,
It's the
and
sorry, go ahead.
no, I just think, and bringing this down to earth a bit into our day-to-day world, you're going to have chatbots that historically have been really bad, but
Right.
that are amazingly good, in some cases more capable than the human being customer service reps that you see or talk to on the phone through large language models and AI and other technologies, and natural language processing and voice. So businesses are going to leverage these technologies to provide better service, cheaper service, to deliver better customer experiences. So it's getting practical, I think, just beyond the hype as well.
There, I know this is a favorite topic of yours, Dan, right? Customer service. There, I think we are there. I've certainly interacted with chatbots in the last year that I couldn't tell whether this
Hmm.
was a person or AI, and they were fantastic, right? They understood the issue, they got it resolved. And again, I the famous Turing test, right? I didn't know, I don't know to this day whether I was dealing with a machine. I probably was dealing with a machine because it was that good. And we're talking about some pretty big brands, and so yeah, I completely agree with
And then will that machine, be your tutor, your teacher assistant, your physician's assistant,
you.
your nurse as sort of a triage or frontline service, possibly your psychologist. I mean, there are lots of implications there, but lots of people are working on all these things.
Yeah, there's a book I recommend all the time to people who are in higher ed called it's about recording how Bach was recorded in the 20th century by a guy named Paul Ehrlich, and he talks about how in the beginning of the century where there was no recording, the idea that somebody could record Bach was laughable, right? And then if you fast forward a century, it's reinventing Bach, and Bach is heard by more people all over the world than it was 100 years ago, and played it at the highest possible level. However, to have someone, human being, play it for you at that level, an Angela Hewitt, for example, right? It's an experience for the elite. So my prediction has been that in a century, more people will be taught in a much better way by machines than they are today. But to have a human person explain Hamlet to you will be something special. And so that's the paradox of this, right? That the average quality of the experience, I think, will go up for most people in the world, but then people will place a premium for having an actual professor stand 10 feet in front of you and explain Shakespeare to you.
Yeah, and I think it's about closing the digital divide. I mean, most people in the world don't have access to a doctor, a professor,
Yeah.
a nurse, a physician, and so can these services be brought to a bigger audience in developing countries and Africa and places that you know I mean, if you there are places you would never see a doctor your whole life, you wouldn't see a doctor, right? So is there a way to scale healthcare, to scale education in ways that just aren't practical for the developed world?
Hey, I have a related question, and that is, and I know you work a lot with marketing officers, and then how is marketing being thought of these days? If in the old school, right, in the Kotler days of business school, you were sort of delivering a message to an audience. What is marketing today at the very best marketing departments? How would you define what that function does?
Well, I guess it's different from B2B or B2C. I mean, traditionally in B2B, where I'm a practitioner, marketing was about delivering leads and making sales and thought leadership. And there's a tension there because it's really hard to show evidence or the value of marketing these days, given how noisy and fragmented and difficult it is to reach buyers and consumers and how much content there is out there. So I don't know that I have a definition myself, I mean, for me, I think marketing has to change to just be education and community building because, traditional marketing, advertising in particular, paid, and certainly the old school marketing, billboards and print and ads and radio and all these things are just disappearing and being just consumed by the tsunami of digital. So that's a great question. I mean, despite having, 500,000 social followers and working quote unquote in marketing, I've never had a job in marketing. I've never worked in marketing. So, for me, it's more about genuine connection, community building, and education, kind of like what you guys are doing.
Wonder what
Yeah, I think the issue, Evan, is marketing has become one of those all-encompassing terms like AI, right? Where it's like most of this stuff actually isn't artificially intelligent, but that's the term we use. Marketing, to me is two categories. It's sales enablement versus awareness and positioning and branding. I remember early in my career when I realized there was a difference because, you'd be in a large enterprise, Carlos, and, you'd see two different kinds of people, regardless of title. You'd see two different kinds of people. You'd see you go to a trade show, you'd see the people that are working the room and networking and having conversations. And you'd see the people handing out the stress balls with a logo on it, right? Those are two, they're both, a lot of times they're both in the marketing function, but those are two very different profiles and personas. And so, I think to your point, Evan, a lot of the challenges around, reporting and ROI and stuff like that, that is part of the problem, and they go hand in hand. But I think in an AI world, hopefully we get better because, a lot of these things, as you pointed out before, can be, automated and done at massive scale, personalized at massive scale. And I think that, also in a world where, the majority of the sales process now happens before a salesperson even gets on the phone, there's actually more that marketing needs to do. And in order to create, one of the biggest problems I see, and Evan, I'm curious if you see the same, is that, organizations will create, one pitch or one message, but they'll actually be selling to 4 or 5 different buyer personas, right?
Mm.
Completely different, types of buyers, but they don't really change the messaging from one to the other. So, maybe this is an opportunity to, use some of these tools to do that more effectively.
Yeah, totally. And there's a reason the average CMO tenure is like 2 years now. If there's just so much change, so much disruption, so many new channels, it's really hard to be a marketing leader today and to demonstrate and show value and to make a difference in this crazy, chaotic, fragmented world. And so, yeah, definitely beware of accepting that CMO role.
I think
What's your advice, Evan? If for the sales and marketing people that are watching this and saying, okay, I've had Chat GPT write some copy for me. I've had it, summarize some stuff for me and create some graphics for me. What's your advice for them as to, what to do next and maybe reach some scale on a company level versus just an independent, individual level?
Yeah, I mean, it takes being a real practitioner and not just reading the Wall Street Journal headlines, but rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty and using the tools, not just one tool, but dozens of tools, creating your own sort of Gen I stack, looking for the best of breed in different areas and learning from others. I mean, spending frankly, probably hours a day on the social media platforms, YouTube, learning about the different opportunities. All the content, all the education, all the skills are out there. You just have to invest, the 10,000 hours, as Malcolm Gladwell says, in learning them. And this isn't something you could just sort of outsource. I mean, you have to be a master of this new craft and you have to sort of learn for yourself before you can train, educate, equip others in your organization. I think too few marketing leaders have the time or maybe the inclination to really get hands on with a lot of these new tools.
How about you, Carlos? You up to 10,000 hours yet? You're pretty close, no?
Only on piano, right? So I can actually keep it past the 10,000 hours line about a year ago. So I do find it, I think about it in that context of when I wanted to learn the piano and I said, okay, it's going to take me 10 years to learn to play the piano. And it's one of the few things left that people will still, I was going to mention, the player piano effect, right? Of if I go to the piano and I was going to play a piano and pretend to be playing Mozart, and you're like, oh, that's great, it's really the piano. If I actually walk up and play a Mozart sonata, it's valued because it took the 10,000 hours to
Mm.
be able to do that, right? When I think about, so I wonder about just that human value allocation to some of these creations. I've spent some time with ChatGPT and on Dolly with images. My youngest son is an
Hmm.
future, budding animator. He's 15.
Hmm.
We've looked at animation and how that's changing, and I think it's a really good point, Evan, of what Adobe did for art. Where what it did was, if people say democratize, I don't think it democratized. I think what it did was it put in a different kind of door. The
Mm.
traditional artists could still get into art school, but then suddenly
Mm.
somebody who couldn't manipulate a brush, just didn't have the cerebral wiring to do that in a physical sense, but could do it on a computer, suddenly that person can become an artist as well, right? Just, and so I think I find that very interesting that the traditional old school, you want to paint with oils or acrylics, you go right, keep on going, right? But then suddenly this whole other set of the population who wanted to be artists, but their skill set lay in the digital realm, could claim that title. And so there are probably, we'll probably see a similar thing. And I think about, back to your question about B2B, I think as a consultant, right? I think marketing for us, it did two things. One is there was always the top of mind issue, so that when
Mm.
the problem arises, oh yeah, let's call whatever, right? And so this is why Accenture plays such a great value on alumni who went to work for clients, because we knew we would always be sort of top of mind. The other was a narrative, right? It's like, is the firm getting better, more relevant, or worse slash less relevant? And I thought one thing that we did well was keeping the client thinking. It was like, it wasn't that they knew all the details, but they sort of always got a sense that, hey, whatever is around the corner, Accenture people are sort of already there, kind of kicking the tires,
Mm.
checking it out for us. So that, I think, and that those were two very valuable things, because when a problem arose, you were top of mind, or at least in the top two or three that was going to get the RFP, which is where most of the business came from. And also that the feeling was you're a legitimate contender to win, right? We trust that you're kind of on the right path uh, relative to what's happening in the world, right? So I think that second one, which is really a narrative issue, I think you're right there, Evan, right? To the extent that narratives get better, because most B2B narratives aren't that great, to the extent that B2B narratives are improved, hopefully in a big way because of this new technology, because now you have a different
Yeah.
writer working with you. That's a really interesting thing.
Yeah. And if you're a three-man consulting
Yeah,
shop,
right.
how do you compete with Accenture? Well, actually, you can. You can have an amazing looking website with some of the Gen AI tools and collateral. You can have, business cards and a blog and social media that look fantastic. You can have an amazing logo. All of that done through these tools. You can create thought leadership content. You can use tools like StreamYard to be a media company, like we're doing here. So all of a sudden, a three-man shop can compete with a 300,000 man and woman shop
Mhm.
on a more level playing field. How interesting is that?
So, Evan, in the 2 or 3 minutes we have left, I'm curious. Maybe we could ask you just to get tactical. I know you've done a bunch of research. For sales and marketing people watching this, are there 2 or 3 tools that you'd recommend that they try right now? AI ways.
Yeah, I mean, of course, everyone's on ChatGPT. Check out the plugins, which of course you need the paid service. There's just an amazing variety of basically apps. It's like an app store, most of which are free and allow you to do different things uh, and access different tools through the ChatGPT framework. So if you need to do, get real data and analytics, you can use one tool. If you need to look at analyze links, if you need to write code or analyze a CSV file, there are plugins for that. So you really check out the plugins that are available, because there's something I'm sure in your industry or your vertical that's it's going to really wow you. And also give Bard a try. I mean, Bard is come a long way. They're using a new model there There are things that Bard can do research-wise. It can research LinkedIn data and index it in ways that ChatGPT can't. So that's really interesting. And all of what Microsoft is doing with Copilot, I think is fascinating, both for developers, but also just for your office suite. If you can generate a custom presentation using prompts with Copilot, you can do a client presentation, knock it out in 5 minutes, and probably one of the best looking presentations you've ever created. So there's just stuff like that I'm finding really helpful.
Evan, I didn't want to let you leave without asking you about X and sort of what's happening in that transformation. If you could for a moment.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, for me, it's, Twitter has this, I've been tweeting for 15 years, so, it has a unique brand and position. It was kind of a failing company. I think Elon really jumped the shark is with the rebrand. Although, I see there's a certain generation that just doesn't tweet and doesn't go on Twitter. So he's trying to appeal maybe to that Gen Z community, less than Gen X, pun intended. So we'll see. I mean, he claims, usage and his active users are up. The data seems to show that. But, if you're a brand, a marketing specialist, you would have seen generally not a good idea to throw $10 billion worth of brand equity, out the door overnight. So we shall see.
Okay, thank you for the thought.
Carlos's favorite subject is he's got a dartboard with Elon's picture on it, and every week he tries to throw a dart at it.
I'm not a fan. Let's put it that way.
And also,
yeah, I mean, I like he has good rockets. He makes good rockets. Maybe he should stick to his knitting, as they say.
Stick to cars and rockets.
Evan,
thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate your time and your thoughts.
Yeah, it's been fun. Look forward to catching up again.
Thanks, Evan. So Carlos, aside from getting in your dig on Elon at the end there, interesting, right? I mean, I think, it's funny. You mentioned that analogy, the piano, which I think is a great analogy, right? I was talking to my wife about getting a piano, and, it went from getting like a piano that the kids could learn how to play the piano on to me wanting a player piano because I know it's going to be 10 years until they can actually play something I want to hear. So I'm like, oh, I want the player piano so it can play piano music in the house. And then my wife's like, you just spent all this money on this crazy speaker sound system. Why don't you just play piano music on the sound system, right? So it's like, and I'm like, because it won't sound exactly like a piano. Then she's like, why did you get that sound? So it's like, you have these different levels or layers, and maybe that's what AI does to the world, right? Where you say, hey, the elite will get the person playing the piano, whatever the AI equivalent of that is.
I believe
so many more people can listen to piano music now because of the access that it's giving.
I really do believe in this theory that came to me after reading Reinventing Bach by Paul Elie, right? That classical music is a great predictor of what I think will happen in other areas, right? Where what seemed impossible was impossible. And he makes the point in the book that it wasn't until Abbey Road was created, which was created, I think he said, to record Bach, right? Where it put together all the technology in the world into one building, that it became sort of possible. So I do think that's, I think in the future, we will place a premium on flawed but human creation, right? As opposed to, there's no beauty that had some flaw to it. I think that's what makes it human. And I think to the point that the average consumer of advertising copy, everything from that to art, maybe that will increase, or the average quality level will go up. But there's something about a human to human interaction. I don't see that going away. In fact, I see it becoming even more valuable.
Yeah, more differentiated, right?
Right, more differentiated. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Carlos, good show as always. And for anybody watching who wants to dive deeper, let us know. We offer free coaching sessions and state-of-the-industry briefings on a variety of digital transformation, automation, and AI topics. So go to irpaai.com. In the meantime, Carlos, we'll be back on Wednesday, live noon Eastern, 9 Pacific.
Absolutely. We'll see you then, Dan.
Have a great week, everybody. Take care.
Thanks for watching.